Hello, everybody, and welcome to Conservatish episode 212. My name is Peter Edgar Feliciano. Make sure you subscribe wherever you're listening. Make sure you share this, rate it, like it, embed it, comment on it, all that stuff. Find me on Instagram at Peter_Feliciano or at my backup at Conservatish, because my first account will be deleted soon because white liberals know what's best for us. You can find me on Twitter at Rule62Peter, and you can support my podcast and my music at patreon.com/conservatish, or just Venmo me. I don't care. Ladies and gentlemen and sirs, we have the wonderful Stephanie Edmonds on the show. Yay!
Ooh, thank you.
Thank you so much. Please plug yourself.
Yeah, so Stephanie Edmonds, you can find me on Instagram at Teaching Liberty. I'm also on Twitter at Teach Liberty 1. Just didn't work out that I could get them the same. And then also on YouTube at Teaching Liberty. So I'm, over on YouTube, I'm starting to really build out kind of some courses and try to build like a school. So I'm trying to have an in-person school, start like a homeschooling co-op, and then doing the online course thing. And you can go to my website, teachingliberty.org. We're building a community over there. You can get learning activities. So I'm really excited for this year. As I was telling you before the show, I'm free. I'm a free woman, right? I'm out here holding the line against these mandates, and I'm not scared of my employer anymore. I believe in myself. I believe in my vision, and we're building something new out here.
Right. That's so badass. Ooh, I said badass. I'm going to do my best, everybody. I'm going to do my best. Okay, so first things first, you and I met at one of those New York Freedom rallies. And for those who don't know what a New York Freedom rally is or what a freedom rally is, it's a freedom for a rally for medical freedom, for body autonomy, and it looks like a lot of different things. And I've talked about it on the show before. There are some people at those rallies who are anti-vax. There are some people at those rallies who are like, there's microchips in it. But and then there are people at those rallies who are vaccinated, and even some who are pro-vax, but don't want people to be forced to take something into their body that they don't want, because that's logical, because that's morality. Stupid.
Yeah.
But anyway.
And I just want to say, like, I am really impressed with the diversity of the crowd. Of course, anytime a bunch of people come together, you're going to get some like outliers and stuff, and more power to them. But I think that if you really look at the majority of the group, it is just like good Americans from all walks of life. You have like working class, middle class, you have some up like high class people, you have people that are teachers and city workers, you have people that work in private settings, you have doctors, you have Republicans, you have Democrats, you have people like me who've never subscribed to a party, you have socialists, you have the classic progressive liberals. So it is so diverse. And I just encourage anybody, whether you're in New York City, get involved in New York Freedom Rally, or wherever you are, connect with your people and start to take action.
So while we're on that subject, Boston and Philly and a couple of other places just recently enacted those mandates. I mean, we'll definitely get into that, but I like keeping it loose, Stephanie. I like, we'll ride this however it goes.
Yeah.
I figured you seem like a.
I should have brought my brunch drink. I'm about to make some little brunch after this.
Listen,
but I'm just going with the water this morning, and
I've got some rose quartz on my desk. Okay, we're getting real spiritual right now. But how, if you're living in Boston, because I haven't seen any yet, but I'm sure as an outsider there wouldn't be. But how would someone in Boston or Philly or one of these new places get in touch or start their own medical freedom rallies?
So there's definitely medical freedom groups in both of those places. I believe yesterday I saw some posts up about something happening in Boston. And what I would say too is I'm seeing how I really got into this movement was from last year when I was advocating for open schools. And what I've seen is a lot of those parent groups and not just parents, but concerned citizens kind of around that group have kind of transitioned more into the medical freedom generally. So I would look for those types of groups. I definitely know in Boston, there's one specifically for medical freedom. In Philly, I know that there's a lot of people doing advocacy around the open schools. And again, I know that they're also kind of in that no mandate territory because they don't want kids to be mandated to go to school.
Right.
So, yeah, I think, like, Facebook is a great place to go look for groups, although I've been having issues because some of the groups I'm involved with are, like, shadow banned, so if you search them, they actually won't pop up. Somebody needs to send you, like, a direct link.
Right.
But I would do Facebook, Instagram, definitely, and Twitter. Just, like, go on and search, medical freedom and your city or your town, and just start connecting with people, ask questions. Um, the people who I have grown the most with are people who I literally just met so randomly. Like, I met this one woman when I was, like, out on my walk, and we exchanged information, and then you see each other's Instagram, and then you go back and forth, and you invite people. Another woman, I was talking about, like, trying to do some homeschooling stuff for on Facebook, and she called me, and now I'm tutoring her daughter, and we're working
Mhm.
together on some projects. Because the reason that we linked up is because she's, like, against the mask and against the mandates and super frustrated with the system, but she's a single mom like me, so we don't
Right.
have a lot of options.
Right.
Just it's social media, like.
Right. Right. When you seem like you're from New York, you have a New York accent. Where are you from?
Yeah, so I grew up just outside the city in Stamford, Connecticut. So without traffic, it's about 30 minutes to the city, or to the Bronx, and then, maybe like 45 to Manhattan. So it's definitely like a lot of influence from that New York City culture. Um,
Mhm.
and
But
then
it's
I
like a
spent a lot of time in New York City the past decade. I was living in New York City,
right.
working in New York City. Always been going in and out of the city, even just as a kid, go out there and skateboard.
Right. Because I was going to say, I grew up in the Bay Area. So you seem
Okay.
like a mix of New York and like a chick who opened a fish taco place in Santa Cruz. You know what I mean? Like a
That's so funny.
that's, yeah.
Shout out to fish tacos. I know that they get a lot of hate, but I love me some good fish tacos.
Let's not disagree this early in the podcast. So you grew up outside of New York. Did you know that you wanted to be a teacher early on in your life? When did you know?
So, it was kind of one of those things that when I got to college, I was like, "Alright, I gotta do something, so I'm gonna do this." But it was something I was always super interested in. Like, I remember very distinctly when I was in 5th grade, there was this whole big redistricting thing going on,
Mhm.
because the demographics of where I live, of course, at the time, I didn't know this, but, going back and trying to understand really the historical context of this thing that happened when I was 10 years old, I discovered that the demographic trends in where I was growing up were about a decade ahead of the United States in general. So our Black population was pretty significantly growing by a few percent. And then we were getting a large influx of immigrants, mostly from Central America, some South America and Caribbean, and then as well as from Eastern Europe, right? We got a large influx from when there was like the Yugoslavia, Kosovo
Mhm.
civil war
Mhm.
going on. So we're having all these demographic changes. And then, of course, that affects your tax base and how you're giving services and what you're dealing with in your schools. And so one of the things that they wanted to do was to redistrict to better balance the schools racially and socioeconomically. Right. So, for example, on the side of town where I grew up, I went to the one of the like, I don't wanna say worse, but, like, cause like, when I went there, I didn't know,
Right.
cause you know what you know, but in comparison to, like, other schools where their population is a little bit more wealthy and white, cause that's how it goes in America, um, they had more things going on, more opportunities. Their PTOs would raise all this money, and, like, we could barely get people to show up.
Right.
Like, GE ended up sponsoring us, like, giving us backpacks, and so, they wanted what they ended up doing was a lot of stuff, but how it affected me was for middle school, they decided that instead of going to the middle school where that's the next neighborhood over, because middle schools, there's not as many as elementary. Where all my friends who I'd seen from the neighborhood go for years, they were like, "No, we're actually gonna bus you past this school, past another school to go to the middle school all the way up in the other side of town so that you guys can balance them out, socioeconomically and racially." Where I live is like a large Hispanic population.
Mhm.
So they wanted to send us up there to
Right.
balance
Right.
it out, I guess you could say, and you just see how
Right.
the system works. Because we get up there, and then the kids from my side of town were in, like, the lower groups, and the kids from their side of town, they're in, like, the higher groups, and it's like, "Well, why?" And they're like, "Well, it's based on test scores." And
Mhm.
so, like, some of it I understand now as a teacher from the system side, but the problem is that when you get in those groups, you almost get locked in, right? They don't actually provide you the things that you need to be enriched so that you can be like the high kids or whatever. Or
Meaning like you actually dig down in your demographic that you're used to rather than mingle. Is that what you mean?
yeah, I mean, it's just like because they're like, I don't know, when you realize like, "Oh, I'm kinda like this is just me, like, I'm in the lower group," and then the teachers, they give you stuff to your ability, but they're not actually addressing the missing pieces so that you could become, like, the full potential of student, whether that's, like, a really academic way or
Right.
sports or whatever it is, and so you just start to see how the system works. I've always been one to ask questions and, sometimes say an outrageous thing or two. So,
You're
yeah, that really
unrighteous.
got my interest, and then I really was a big athlete, and then I'm like, "Well, as a girl, you don't really become a professional athlete like that." So then I was like, "Alright, let me go into teaching because it's something I'm genuinely interested in. I believe in change, I believe in the power of education," and I fell in love with it.
Awesome. Awesome. So you went to college?
I did. Yeah, I went to UConn for my undergrad, and I did psychology and history, double major,
Ooh.
and then I went to Brooklyn College for grad school 'cause, you need to get your teaching certificate and your graduate degree in
And they
order
teach you
to
about Biggie.
big Biggie? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. Yeah,
Oh,
they
I
teach
have
you about Biggie.
right here. Yeah,
Hey,
I
there
got
you
this from,
go.
like, a Nets game or whatever they gave it out, Brooklyn Nets.
Right.
Back when I was allowed in there before I was considered
I
unclean.
know. Kyrie. Shout out to Kyrie.
Yeah.
So you had this experience. You started teaching. How many years in before stuff started to look a little
So
shady? I've
this
had
would
a
have been
couple of.
year
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, I was just saying this would have been my 6th year with the Department of Education. Well, during undergraduate and grad school, I was a tutor for 5 years,
Mm,
doing, like, reading and math tutoring, so I consider that part of, like, my teaching career. I actually think that was, like, the best training I could have ever gotten, like, more
right.
than anything I learned at grad school.
Right.
So, I'm over a decade in, and then this would have been my 6th year, or I'm still technically employed by the Department of Education in New York City. I'm just not getting paid. So I'm still in year 6.
Right. Before I well, I am gonna, you know what? I'm gonna follow the tangent a little bit. What do you think the logic is? How are you guys gonna get back together? This is what I keep thinking about. Is like, how do I personally work on my forgiveness of people who have segregated me and seen me as a second class citizen for the last 6 months, and or plus, and how are you going to be able to go back to work with people who complied? Like,
Mhm.
what work do you think you need to do, and I mean, to look these guys in the face is going to
Right.
be difficult. It's going to be hard.
You know, last year or yeah, it was last year we were remote. And as I had mentioned, I was voraciously pro opening schools.
Mhm.
And I was railing against both the union and the DOE, as well as other teachers who I saw as either sitting there silent or actively taking advantage of the situation.
Right.
And I asked myself, like, how am I going to go back into the classroom with these people?
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
And I'm not saying it was 100% perfect, especially because we are rolling into the year facing this vaccine mandate. But you know what? When you get in there, it's not about the adults, right? In the building. It's about the kids, and I'm there for the kids. And shout out to my co-teacher because even though we didn't always, we kind of fell off because of the open school stuff, when we were in that classroom, like we had a really good thing going, right? Even after all the stuff. And we could, find our groove, play off each other. I really liked how our, just like we both worked with each other really well. So, and then in as far as the mandate goes, like, yeah, I would have loved it if 50% of the teachers called out and held the line with us for a few days, right? But at the same time, it's not them really that's doing this to me. And so because the Department of Education is this huge bureaucracy, right?
Mhm.
Those are the people doing it to me. I don't see those people. Right? My school, I like my school. I like my admin. I like the people that I work with despite some differences I have. As long as I know that they're there for the kids. Um, you know, I would love if we get to go back and we win our case and all that. I don't know how it's going to work out, but we do have a big case court date coming up this week. So I'm hopeful, like we are winning.
Yeah. Yeah, we really are. And especially the last, couple weeks when everybody got Omicron, whatever it's
Omicron,
called.
yeah.
With everybody getting it, now they can't go, well, it's for your safety that I'm protecting myself from you because everybody is now getting it. And I love, by the way, and I know I've talked about it at length, but I don't care because you're not listening. Well, my people are, but they switched the narrative to, oh, well, it wasn't supposed to protect you from
Right.
infection and transition or transmission. Lie. That's a
Right.
lie. I know in the fine print it doesn't, because we've all been saying that for a hot
Right.
minute. But in the fine print it doesn't. But everyone online, Fauci, this is not,
Right.
and I hate using his name anyway, because people flippantly use it. Fauci
Right.
lied, people died. It's just like, okay, yeah,
Right.
all
Right.
right, yeah, it's catchy, thank you. But in reality, on video, in articles, thousands of examples that I can cite, these people said it was about infection and transmission, and that's what justified their mandates and their passports.
Right. But now they're trying to justify the mandates just being like, well, you're not gonna die. And then,
Right.
maybe it brings down infection or whatever. But I think that the narrative is really starting to crack.
Yes.
Going back
Yes.
to the NBA, I believe that I read that they're gonna consider people who have natural immunity to be the same as fully vaccinated,
Yeah, I think that
right?
was NCC. No, it
Okay.
was one of
One of
them.
them,
Anyway, yeah.
right? And you see that with the other sports as well. They had to like lower the amount of time because it was just making it impossible to play. We saw
Right.
the CDC do the same thing. They're like, oh, 5 days after a positive test, like regardless of what happens in between, like then you can go back to work, even if you have symptoms. So I'm like, okay, so I'm unvaccinated and healthy and I
Right.
can't go to work, and they're vaccinated and have symptoms still, but they're good to go. Like it just
Right.
it doesn't make sense. I'm hopeful that it will continue to fall apart, but at the same time, like we saw the fallout from 9/11, we saw the fallout from Afghanistan and that pullout, and people know, but it's like life has to continue on, and people just don't have enough. I don't know if it's courage or energy, or it's just like too confusing and mammoth to do anything about it, but just try to feed their family for another day.
Right. But I will throw this in, everybody. If you're listening, you feel like it's too much, like we've already won a bunch of things with not very much effort. The thing about a bully, and I've said this on the show, but the thing about a bully is once you sock them in the gut, they don't come back to you to try to bully you again, because they want to go for the easiest. You know what I'm saying? Once you stand up to them, they're
Right,
like, oh man, do I want to deal with that guy or do I want to go with the other nerd? Like
right,
they go, they go with the path of least resistance. So if you give a
right.
little bit of resistance, it makes them go, fine, whatever. You know
Right.
what I'm saying?
And I would say the same thing too, like, okay, that's how other people react, but also for yourself, right? The first time that you go into a store and you're not wearing a mask, like if you're in a place where mask mandates are still prevalent, or where like even without a mask mandate that the mask wearing is still prevalent,
Right.
especially now we've seen a big increase in it around here with Omi, our guy Omi Kron. So, but the first time you do it, it's like your heart is racing. You're like, oh no, everybody's looking at me, da da da. But then it gets easier every time you do it. And I'm really to that point, and I've been here for a while where I don't sweat it. Like my
Mm-hmm.
heartbeat doesn't increase anymore.
Mm-hmm.
I have my kind of technique down of non-engagement, or very few things that I say, staying very, very calm.
Mm-hmm.
And, for example, when I was at my alumni hockey game, and they were like making us wear masks on the rink, and it's like ridiculous because you see the puffs of smoke coming out from the from the air, and I refuse to wear it. And like every time the beginning of the game, the coach told me, I'm like, no, I'm good. I can't wear it, like, and then the ref is like, oh, you have to wear it. The athletic director, he's, saying you have to wear it. I'm like, okay,
Mm-hmm.
cool. Like, that's good. I'm not going to. And then the coach finally, he's like, can you just like put it around your chin? And I'm like, did you just hear the words that came out of your mouth? Like you're telling me it's all theater and stupid. And
And this is exactly the reality is this is about passing the buck, ladies and gentlemen.
Right.
This is human behavior 101. I don't want to deal with it, so I'm going to let these other people deal with it. I'm part of a certain spiritual group, and I won't break anonymity necessarily, but I'm a part of a certain spiritual group. I've been sober for 19 years,
All right,
and
congratulations.
there are certain meetings in this area who are requiring a vax pass to go into their meeting. And this is against the traditions of that certain spiritual group. And it's not even that the group is deciding, but well, the church that we hold the meeting is requiring that. That's called passing the buck.
Right.
Well, if the church you're holding a meeting at says that only white people are allowed at your meeting, what would you do? Would you say, well, it's the church's decision? Or would you go,
Right.
ew, and take your meeting somewhere else? You would take your meeting somewhere else. You would
Exactly.
take yourself somewhere else. That same thing happened with that
Right.
guy. Oh, would you just do it? Would you just do it? And it's very simple. I'll also point that out before we go back to you. It is, you do get practice at it. I've been riding the train now, subway, for a couple months without a mask, and nobody has said anything to me. I've gotten a
I was in a
couple looks.
car full of cops, and it was like probably 7 or 8 cops. They must have been, like, getting on and, like, going to their stations or whatever,
Right.
and it was, like, me and 2 other people actually in the car too without masks, not a word. They don't
Beautiful.
it's not enforced, guys.
And stay calm, like Stephanie said.
Right.
Stay calm. I would say don't just say no, thank you. No, I'm okay. And when I have my mask off, I smile. And
Mm,
when I go into Staples or I go into somewhere else, and I know that they want me to wear a mask, I kick it off right away. Hey man, how
right.
you doing? I'm nice and like, hey, how you doing? I'm
Yeah,
like,
yeah,
I'm
yeah.
buzzing because now I'm engaged with them. I'm not looking like guilty. When I used to steal, back before I got sober, when I used to steal, that was the mentality. Don't look like a
Mm.
quiet, guilty guy. Look at, hi, how you doing? Buy something at the counter. It's that same type of thing, except now you're not doing anything illegal, because it's not a law. But anyway,
Right,
like
right.
you act like, hey, you act like yourself, and
Mm,
you'd be surprised how many people engage, refreshed
right.
that they want to
Ex
connect with you.
Right, exactly. People are really craving that connection, and by the way, we played our alumni hockey game. In the
Right.
end, though, they wouldn't take a picture because I didn't have my mask on, like, usually take a picture, I'm like, "Whatever, we played the game." Um, so, yeah, I just encourage people to just take a little step at a time to fight back,
Right.
and also to something that is a trend that I've been wanting to see for a while, rip it up. I don't know if you saw that up at
No.
our protest in Albany, the state capital in New York.
Right.
Tremel Thompson, the labor leader of the MTA, ripped up his Vax card, and
Beautiful.
they're the only agency in the city that doesn't have the mandate because they're actually controlled by the state. And unlike the healthcare workers or some other places that have been mandated, the state knows like not to mess with the MTA because they were on it early. And so he is fully vaccinated, or I don't know if he had 2 or 3 shots, but whatever
Right.
they're considering fully vaccinated. And then he ripped up his card and said, I'm vaccinated, but I don't approve of segregation. These are segregation cards. And I think listen, if you can't stand out here and say that you support medical freedom and then participate in a segregated system, right?
Right.
And I've told some people, I'm like, you should rip it up. And they're like, but what if I need it? I'm like,
Right. Right. Ain't no such things to get New York. Ain't no such things as halfway crooks. So you're either going to get in or get out. Don't be
at this
coming up to
point.
us. Me and Maggie, I had Maggie on my or 2 episodes ago. We,
Okay.
we were talking about you can't come to the party with us after this is all over. Hey, remember we got through it? Nah, you had a fake card. You had a whatever. Don't. Oh, but what if
I
Nickelback comes into town?
know.
Have some cojones. See how I cleaned it up. Have
Yes,
some have
yes.
some have some strength. Have some dignity. Have some
I know.
integrity. Creep.
And, I do think that most situations there are nuance, but I think we're just like getting more and more to that point where it's either like you support tyranny or you don't. Like there's
Right.
not a lot of gray area where we're going, unfortunately, because I've long been an advocate for nuance. And I think like especially when it
Mhm,
comes to the culture wars, like
mhm,
we need more nuance and it's not
mhm.
black and white.
No.
But I think as you step further and further to tyranny, because it's such a fundamental blow to liberty, it does become like, you know what? We have all these differences, and shout out to Dave Smith because this is something that he says. And we have all these differences, and that's cool. We can work those out after. If you're against
Yes.
these mandates,
Yes.
then you're
Yes.
on my team.
Yes.
And
Yes.
so yeah, like, we have to get a little bit more decisive about this. You have to choose. And I hope you choose liberty.
Right. Now, I've had a few teachers on my show before, and they've said this thing. One in particular, Nico. It was his first year. He was just done. He had already come on my show a couple of times when he was getting ready to be a teacher. Then after his first year, he came in and we talked about race specifically. He's a teacher in the Bay Area, which is already like, God bless you. But he's a teacher in the Bay Area, and he's half black, half Filipino, or no, Japanese. Anyway, same thing.
Shout out to Nico.
So Nico came on my show and he talked about the problems that he was facing, especially being one of the only people of color in that area, is the white guilt would overwash people. And he said that they went to some weird meeting where they're talking about they're training teachers in a Zoom last year,
Right.
and they're training about art. And like literally 2 seconds into the art presentation, there's like a flowery picture of a slave boat, and be like, "See, race is everywhere." And he's like, I disagree with that." And like, I'm
Like,
the only like non-white person in the Zoom room. Like, can
yeah,
you like, why does race have to be in every single thing that we do? Why can't we just have an art class? I thought this was just an art
right,
class. And he said that everybody in the Zoom room, when they were in the giant one, was like silent. But when they broke
right,
off into separate one, he had people quietly agreeing with him.
right,
But then
right.
when they got back into the Zoom, the big one,
Boop.
silent, right? And he said that this is the thing, and I want to ask you about it. He said that teachers are good students. And when they're
Yes.
good students, they want to check all the boxes and do all the right things and dance and jump how high and blah, blah, blah. What's your experience with that?
Yeah, I mean, I think I am basically in full agreement with him.
Mhm.
My before I was teaching Liberty, my channel was called Class Disruption. And that was kind of my whole thing, is that, a lot of education is very compliance based. Now, of course, you need to have rules, and like I
Sure.
do believe in like looking good and it's uniformity to an extent.
Sure.
But when it becomes like simply about compliance in and of itself, and simply by complying that you can make your way through and do well, then that's a problem, right?
Okay.
And so that was my whole thing, is that both in terms of like, okay, if there's a kid in your class who's like disrupting things, maybe that kid has something important to say, right? Maybe you need to figure out how to unlock what it is that kid is trying to add to the class, right? It is coming out as rude and disrespectful. And of course, there's a point where you have to take a kid out and you have to do that. But I think that
Right.
that's always the first assumption before you actually make an attempt to bring that kid in, even though we love to talk about all this
Mhm.
inclusive, this and that
Mhm.
stuff.
Mhm.
And then it was also from the teacher perspective too, is like, I'm that teacher that's not kind of scared to say what I know everybody is thinking, or ask that question that people want to be asked. And
Right.
now, of course, what happened to me? Um, I got sent to the principal's office.
Nice.
I was told
Yeah.
I was told no more class disruption. It's too disruptive, and
Nice.
so they treated me just like the kids that I was, trying to say that we need to help a little bit more.
Right.
Um, so now I'm teaching Liberty.
Yeah. Now there's that same type of thing, because where do you think the line is? And maybe it's moved. Maybe you found different things that work for you. Because I do believe, yeah, same thing goes. Like if there needs to be a discipline, or if there needs to be, hey, like, no, here's a structure. Here's a
Right,
structure. Kids do need structure, but within that structure,
right,
there is the freedom to be like, oh, what's actually going on? It's not that someone, some kids being just a bully. Like, underneath
mm,
that is, I feel unloved. And underneath that is because my parents didn't. And underneath that is
right.
like, right, you have to like dig a little bit. Um, but where in the line do you think that comes in? Like, what amount of disruption is
Yeah.
like, let's not do that.
Well, I mean, again, if it's so hard to describe, to be
Right.
honest. It's one of those things that it's more about kind of like the feeling of it. I mean, I'm sure people have written a book that describe it better than I am doing right now. I would say one of the things that I think is like missing a lot in our schools is the like extracurricular enrichment side. So, especially in New York City, like some schools do have like some decent programs going on or sports, but like the school I was at, it didn't have like really good or sports programs. Like there was some clubs, but it's really tough when you have like all these little small schools. Like we only had 400 people in our school, so that's only 30 teachers, and like teachers are already doing like several things. So it's, we had a couple good clubs. But what I found is the kids who usually are having the most trouble are the least engaged in those type of activities.
In the
Um,
extracurricular
right, yeah,
activities?
and so, like,
Okay.
there's this big push for social emotional learning, which, is usually done pretty badly, though. There's a couple programs out there I like. I've written some curriculum for social emotional learning programs, but I think that piece, we're trying to compensate with some class when it's like, no, your social emotional learning comes through playing sports, through going to some club, through having a job, like, through having some sort of responsibility because I like to be like the coach in the classroom, kind of like I have that coachy vibe. You know how the coach, there's certain times where the coach comes up to you, puts their arm around you, gives you
Mhm,
that talk, like meets you where you are.
mhm,
And there's other time where the coach is like, sit down and shut up. Now, of course, I don't say that in my like, I wouldn't say sit down and shut up, but you give the teacher eyes, or I use proximity a lot. So yeah, I would say it has to be more of like the coachy vibe where you do both, where you meet the kid where
right,
they are. You give kids
right,
opportunity to speak in some class. I also think we need more of a hybrid of classes, right? You have that class where you sit down, you take notes, and you listen to the teacher. It's more lecture style. And then you have those classes that are really like hands-on and not in this like superficial, like, oh, it's lab day in science,
right.
um, where you're actually building and making something.
And part of that I think comes from there's this John Cleese's book. He talks about in the college he went to, I think it was Cambridge, that there were lectures where I can't remember the exact quote, but he said the lecture was essentially notes going from the mouth of a lecturer onto the pad of the student without passing through the mind of
Mm,
either. Like it doesn't
mm,
even, it's just like
yeah,
when what would have been more engaging, he said, would be let's talk about, let's discuss,
right,
let's whatever. But now obviously kids need to know that they're being heard, and that you're interested in what they have to say, and there's an open dialogue here, even if they're not necessarily engaged or interested in the
right,
topic itself.
right.
But
I just
yeah,
think
a
that, like,
mix of
if you're
things.
suspending a kid over and over again, like, something isn't working, right? Like, your suspensions aren't working. So, you need to maybe adjust your approach.
Right.
I like a hybrid approach again. I like, okay, like, there is gonna be some, like, traditionally punitive punishment, but then there's gonna
Mhm.
be, like, some sort of enrichment or relationship building, like, "You're gonna come to lunch to me with me for every single day this week, right? And we're just gonna
Right.
talk, and we're gonna get to know each other." Because for me, that was always what did it too as a teacher. Like there were some courses that as courses I did not like. But if
Mm,
I liked my teacher, I was there just because I liked my teacher.
right.
And then the opposite was also true. There'd be course like that I thought I should like, and I'm like, yo, this teacher is not that great, you know?
Right.
So
Right. And you clean that up too, because you would have been like, "This sucked." Um, I also had another San Francisco teacher on, anonymous San Francisco teacher. If you want to go listen, everybody.
wait, and was it
Um,
San Francisco or the Bay Area where that teacher was caught with like an anarchist flag in his classroom? It was one of those.
no, I think that was Seattle
Seattle?
or
That was
Portland.
yeah, okay, it was somewhere up there in the Northwest, and I
Right.
just yeah, I know that, like, a lot of the trends that we're seeing all over the country are, like, on steroids, like, in
Right.
Portland and
Right.
Washington and Northern
Right.
Cali, so yeah, go
Right.
ahead.
Which, just as a side note, because again, I'm not saying white liberals are the devil, but I'm just saying, where is it? Who's who? Okay, let me just clarify what I'm saying, because I know there's going to be some new
In the
people who have
tradition
never
of
watched
Malcolm X, in the tradition of Malcolm X.
in the different. Right. In that there's going to be some new people who have never watched Conservatish who are finding this show through Teaching Liberty, and I just want to put this out there, everybody. Listen, know your enemy. That's all I'm saying. I'm not saying they're even enemies, but understand what we're actually up against. And I'm potentially writing an article about this for a friend of mine's website. And it's essentially putting this point across. There is no actual chemical divide. That's what I'm saying. Because
Mm,
online, it gets real easy to be like, oh, the unvaccinated are versus the vaccinated. And no, 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 who we're actually up against are the pro-vaccine people, or not even the pro-vaccine people. I'm
or
sorry,
mandate,
it's the pro-mandate people, and the
right.
pro-mandate people. There's only a couple tops. There's like 2 or 3 million, and almost all of them are white, and almost all of them are famous. Let's be fucking real. Damn it. Okay. So let's be real. So the enemy, the thing we're up against, is really pretty small. It's pretty minuscule. Most people would be
Right.
like, all right, whatever. Even a few months ago, now that everybody's gotten Omicron or whatever the hell, now it's even smaller. Be real. Be real about who we're up
Right.
against. Why did I go on that rant? Um,
No, sometimes
oh,
you just gotta get it out.
dude, that's why I started the show. I just needed a place to rant for a couple of hours.
Oh, I
It's the
love it.
most self-indulgent. Now, I had a teacher on my show, anonymous San Francisco teacher, and a couple years ago, and she talked about one of the things, and she had the experience of public as well as private,
Mm,
right? And she definitely loved the private a lot more because there's more room and there's more
right,
focus and there's more whatever. There's less red tape. There's this, blah, blah, blah.
right.
But she said one of the things that was happening in her public school is there would be and she was teaching, I want to say fourth grade, fifth grade, and she
Okay.
was talking about how these black kids who were obviously the minority at San Francisco were kept, especially black girls, kept facing, they're in the back of the class with their phones. They kept getting suspended,
Suspended, okay.
infraction suspended, and the administration decided, let's just not give them consequences anymore because there were
Okay.
too many kids, too many black kids in detention. So let's just
And
not
it
give them
doesn't look
detention.
good on their statistics.
That's
Okay.
correct. When she said what that white guilt was actually doing was hurting the kids, because
Right,
now I can't help this kid get engaged with me.
right,
She's having a problem because she knows her parent, her mom, and her mom is
right.
completely disengaged and doesn't really
Okay.
care, whatever. And this kid is acting out, but now I can't give them any consequences. I can't
Right.
engage them. I can't take their phone because it's
Yeah.
private property.
See, I'm
That
not saying that, like, giving them the detention is the right or the wrong thing, right?
right.
So,
I'm not saying
if
you
it's
were.
not
Yeah.
working, right? If it's not
Right.
working and you don't necessarily have the support of the parent, it's not don't do anything at all. It's,
Right.
"Okay, let's try to do something else." And again, maybe that's a hybrid approach where you still do give the detention and do some other type of enrichment. Maybe it's, like, where you work out a deal that, like, the phone gets put, because we would have some kids that we basically did that with, where they would leave their phone with, like, the dean during the day, and then they could get it back at the
Right.
end of the day,
Right.
because they just couldn't control themselves. So, I think that there's different things that you can do, and you don't need to, if you're, like, seeing that there is a trend, like, wow, all our this demographic of kids is really getting, over suspended a lot. You
Right.
should ask the question, like, is there some sort of internal bias? Like, I don't think that that's, like, a question that shouldn't be asked, but I just think it needs to be asked in context with these other questions too, right?
Right.
Okay, what's the source of this? Why aren't detentions working? What are some other things that we can do? How can we address some of these other issues? Whereas there just seems to be this focus, like, solely on, like, oh, it's internal bias, and
Right.
we're being racist by suspending them.
Right. One of the things we talked about is the difference between a white teacher and a black teacher. Because let's be real, I'm sorry to get racial again, but you're on conservatish. But white, nice white ladies don't know how to handle. Don't understand that a black kid, like, who's like causing, who's throwing a tantrum. They've
Right.
never experienced that energy before.
Mm,
They get intimidated. They think, "Oh, I can't. I don't know what to. Just suspension. They want to get it away. They
right.
want to handle. They're doing their best. They're well intentioned.
Mhm.
But a black teacher who's dealt with it, who grew up in that energy, who knows that cultural vibe,
Right.
is not intimidated so much and can get it done
Right.
when it
No,
needs
I
to get
definitely
done.
think that there's something to, like, the cultural difference where you come from, and it
Right.
doesn't always need to be a black white thing too. I think a lot of
Sure.
times it cuts more along, like, class lines, but of course class
Absolutely.
lines do, because of our history, have socioeconomic implications. But and I do think representation matters. Like, I do think, for example, like, when I see a girl, like, being a complete badass and, like,
Right.
just, you know, doing her thing, I'm like, "All right." Like, it just hits a little bit different than when I see a guy doing it, or, like, when I meet
Sure.
somebody who's Jewish, I feel like I have a lot of cultural connections with them, and they might understand some of the ways that I move and my understandings more than other people.
Right.
However, that again, it's only one piece. There's more
Mhm.
types of diversity, and there's a lot of
Mhm.
value from
Mhm.
interacting with people that are different from you. I actually think that's my privilege, right? I think that it's even more than white privilege what I have, because I have the ability to kind of straddle both worlds, you could say, right? I can be on like some yacht having a party in some ritzy fancy side of town, and then I could be going meeting up with my friends in a different type of neighborhood. So I've
So
been
you're saying
able
you can
to.
wear Birkenstocks and Timbs. That's what you're saying. You
Yes,
can wear
yes,
right.
yes. And I kind of have that ability to go back and forth between these different worlds and cross over and make a lot of different connections. And I think that's more privilege than just having like quote unquote white privilege where all you know is kind of like this one world, and it's really hard for you to identify with these people and you see them as other. Right? When you don't know somebody and you see them as like this different person, all you can do is stereotype them. All you can do
Right.
is I think that I think we've gotten so much better at this too. Like I was watching Rocky, right? Rocky was made in the 80s.
Right.
And like the cast is super diverse, right? You have Rocky and it was the one where it's like Rocky or Apollo is Rocky's coach, and then he's going up against like Mr.
Oh,
T, who's
Rocky. No,
is the
2?
one before.
No.
Yeah, I think it's 2 because it's the one before the Russian.
But doesn't Apollo die in the
Apollo's still in it. Apollo's like his coach in this one.
Okay.
So
Wait,
I don't know.
man, I got to watch Rocky 3 again
Yeah,
because I
but
thought
anyways,
that's
I was
where.
just, like, noticing how, like, like, the cast is quite diverse, and this is the '80s,
Right.
right? We have a black
Right.
guy coaching a white
Right.
guy. He's going up against a black guy with, his black team, and, of course, there was
Right.
racial implications about, like I think it was based on, like, the Great White Hope versus
Right.
whatever, so there are
Right.
those things too, but I just think that we have like, that was 20 years less than 20 years after people weren't allowed to sit down and eat in the same restaurant,
Right.
right? And they're
Right.
making, like, a super hit Hollywood movie.
Right. This is what I'm saying. That's what I've said it before, but like it's that there are things complicated. Things are complicated. One of the
Right.
things, oh, male privilege, male privilege. Do you guys know that in World War I, the average life expectancy of a junior officer in World War I was 6 weeks?
Mm.
6 weeks. So as soon as he gets enlisted, he's sent to the front, and he only lasts an average of 6 weeks, because as soon as he would go over the top of the trenches, the Germans would look for the guy with the whistle and a
Right.
revolver and shoot him first. Okay. So the average life
Right.
expectancy was 6 weeks. Almost, I believe it was 2%, 3%. Yeah, 2 or 3%. I'm sorry, of the entire population of England died. All men. So let's be real, everybody. There's privileges
Right.
and there's drawbacks. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, it just depends on how what your criteria are, right? Like, for example, women are twice as likely to pass on their genes to the next generation, both for the reasons that you stated, but also just because it's easier to find success in the dating market, right? More women find success, whereas like a smaller group of men that's like more towards the top find success, while the people at the bottom find less success. So on average, women have twice as many pass on as twice as many people to the next generation. You have
Mm,
twice as many female ancestors as male ancestors.
mm,
And then also I would say then on the flip side now, what's happening is actually more women are going to college, and in their 20s to early 30s, I believe that women make more money on average than the average man. And then what happens is as they get into motherhood is actually where you see that
mm.
imbalance because they choose to remove themselves from that
Ta-da!
pool,
They
you know?
choose. Right.
Um, so I think there's again, it's like one of these things that there is like a lot of nuance and a lot of gray area. I think a lot of things that women get frustrated over is that females hold the key to sex, but men hold the keys to relationships,
Yeah, to
right?
love. Yeah.
Right.
Right.
So that I think a lot of women, especially now, as they are doing better for themselves in the workforce, that's then making it a little bit harder on the other side of things to like close that relationship because a
Right.
lot of times when you're doing well in the workforce, it kind of actually gives you a disadvantage in the dating market. That's, a man wants somebody who's going to have his family and do all these sorts of things. So those come to conflict. And I think that that's a lot of right now what is actually driving this whole like male privilege push is that women aren't satisfied because they're not having settling down and having families and doing that thing that like that nurturing side that
Right.
is women's role on average, right? Not
Right.
always, right?
Yeah.
Whatever, however works for you, but I'm talking on average.
Yeah, if nurturing wasn't in your souls, why are there so many cat ladies? Come on now. Come on now. And that's the main push of my thing is always nuance and understanding, whatever, but also honesty, self-honesty. self-honesty. I'm only alive. I know there's maybe people listening who are like, oh, you'll be reincarnated. Maybe.
Mm,
But if I'm only alive once, everybody, I want to be happy, man. I want to be happy. And if I require honesty to myself, self-honesty of like, what do I
mhm.
actually want? I'm allowed to want that and I'm allowed to go for it.
Right.
And I think what also is a disadvantage for women right now is that the messages, in order to try to make love happen, because like you said, I agree. Patrice used to say it a different way. My favorite comic of all time is that women get screwed, guys get screwed on the front end, women get the back. Get screwed on the back end and not the dirty way. We're
Right, right,
talking
right.
about we're talking about on the front end, we're passing it everywhere. Who
Time-wise, yeah.
wants some? Who wants some? Please, whatever. And girls get so many like offers. They think, oh, I have so much love available to me. And
Right,
so oh, I think this guy seems good. They take him home. They go, whatever. And all of a sudden, oh, he cheats on me. Oh, he leaves. Oh, he's a loser. Oh, I can't. And now they're like, oh no, I can't make somebody come to me. And the older they get, that bait gets less and less attractive.
right,
and and that sucks. And that
right,
sucks. But would you swap? And a lot of girls, they're not personally from whatever you want to call it, from society, from culture, from people in
right,
their life. They're not getting told the truth. They're not
right.
getting told the truth of, oh, even going back to the World War I thing. Would you swap your experience? Would you go to the front line and live for 6 weeks, bruh? Calm down. Look at
Right,
it like, would you like to not be, not, oh no, because we don't know when we're
right.
getting
And
laid.
that's even true
That's
today.
up to girls.
Women have a longer lifespan because men typically work in more intensive labor jobs, and then that in turn also causes them to like get things like heart attacks and stuff earlier because they're like so overworked or stressed. And then I wanted to bring it back though, make the connection back to like the classroom and teaching is like I feel really bad for kids today, right? Because like you said, the message that we're sending them, because a lot of like the racial type of stuff and is like under this bigger social justice
Mhm,
umbrella, and another one of like the critical theories because they're all sort
mhm,
of like a critical race theory, which like okay, it's not being taught in schools, but some watered down form of it,
mhm, mhm,
which John McWhorter does a really good job of describing and explaining in his most recent book, something woke. I forget what it is, woke religion, maybe something like that. John McWhorter.
yeah,
But so there's also like the critical gender studies, and so that's also getting in this mix of like inclusion. And then the messages to the kids are so confusing already a time, especially like girls, like lots of hormonal changes, like that's when you are a woman, like you become a woman in high school. And you're trying to figure out like do I like how do I interact with boys, but oh maybe I'm not a boy, maybe, and I can only imagine like when I was a kid because I was like a really hardcore tomboy. Like I didn't wear a dress from first grade until I had my bat mitzvah.
what a
And
surprise.
then no, and I'm still kinda like, I wouldn't consider myself, like, the most, like, girly girl or
Right,
whatever, but, like, at that time, I, like, was probably, a little more confused, right? Because 'Cause you're a kid,
sure,
and I'm like, "Oh, I like all the stuff that the boys do, and, I'm really good at sports, and I don't really like to, like, do all this, like, girly dress up stuff, and, like, girls, all
right,
they do is talk about each other, and, like, I just
mhm,
wanna do things," Which is, again, going back to that when we're speaking on averages, I'm definitely outside of the average in that
sure,
way.
right,
So but, like, I can only imagine if somebody was, like, trying to tell me I'm a boy,
right,
right? Like, I really am, versus my parents being like, "Well, no, you're a girl, like, you can dress however you want, like, that's fine."
mm,
And my mom did a really good job of modeling for me, like, when we were in public, if somebody called me a boy, they'd be like, "Oh, no, that's my daughter," and just move on, like, never got mad at anybody, didn't
mhm,
just, like, moved
mhm,
on like it was nothing. And
right,
so but nobody was trying to tell me that I could be a boy if I wanted to. They were
right,
like, "You can dress how you want, you have to deal with some of the social consequences, but we're here for
mhm,
you."
right. And honestly, let's be real too. Some of the social consequences get way blown out of proportion. Like the social consequence of even like we were talking about not wearing a mask
Right,
on the subway. It's literally
yeah.
maybe,
I mean,
which
middle
won't
school kids are
my
kinda bad.
experience. No one has talked to me on the train about like,
Right,
would you please? But even if it happened, tops 30 seconds of an interaction with somebody I don't like
right,
anyway. is that bad of a consequence?
Yeah.
No, I'm good. Do you really? No, no,
Yeah.
thank you very much. And
I
if I
mean,
need to
it's a
move
little
cars, I'll
bit
move
harder
cars.
in middle school or, like, even high school because, like, your social life is everything.
True, true,
You know,
true.
like, I would get called fag and things like this, and, like,
Right,
I would cry and whatever,
right.
but, it's just different, like, I don't have anybody, like, trying to tell me that I can, like, actually become a boy and, like, I should take these drugs or whatever, and
Right.
again, it's not like a super common thing, it's still like
No.
the outlier situation, but we're seeing it more and more, and, like, girls go through these things. I remember when I was in, high school, this was a thing that would happen in hockey, like, I played ice hockey. So, there would be, like, one girl who came out and be like, "I'm gay," and then, like, 75% of the team would be gay.
Mhm.
And then it was just kind of like a passing thing, you know, and then
Mhm.
the next year it would pass. Like girls,
Right,
they're very social and they wanna be
right,
accepted,
right.
and that's kind of part of their, like, nurturing, tendencies.
Right.
So
And if you weren't teased for that, I'm sorry, you're gonna get teased for something, guys.
right.
This is when you get older, you realize, oh, people called me names, and yeah, but people called me names. I
Mm,
wanted to kill myself. Like, what's the problem? You know what I mean? Like, whether it be fat or tomboy or gay or whatever it is, yes, welcome. Children are evil
right,
sometimes. And that's the way we all work out the social hierarchy is we rub up against each other and we try to figure out who's on top and who's on the
right,
bottom. Some people slink into that role. Some people
right,
slink into that role. Some people slink into the second role and they try to keep fighting for the second, and as soon as the one at the top
right.
gets, does something bad, then everybody pounces on them because now I'm at the top. Like, this is life, man.
Right,
This is
and
humanity.
I think that the best thing that we can do is, like, there's always gonna be a social hierarchy, right? I think a lot of the stuff that we're seeing from, the left, from these social justice critical theories, is
Right.
really trying to flatten that hierarchy to an
Yeah.
unsustainable way, or,
Yeah.
like, just, like, pretending that there is no hierarchy when there clearly still is, or just
Right.
trying to flip it sometimes blatantly on its head.
Right.
But I do think it is desirable to, make the hierarchy, really flexible, right? So you should be able to, just like one of the things that made America great was the ability to move from one class to the other and rags to riches. It should also be like that in the social hierarchy. It isn't desirable to be locked into one place. Like you should be able to move from one place to another. And then I also do think it is desirable to flatten it a little bit, right? Like there shouldn't be so much of a disconnect between the people at the bottom and the people at the top. So, but again, it's about what degree is that desirable to, and what purpose does a hierarchy play. You can't just get rid of a hierarchy and act like it's not going to have consequences, right? We're in this super complex system.
Hmm. Yeah, I agree. I don't necessarily agree with the flattening, but I do understand what you mean. And I think from my personal experience, I was just meditating this morning or listening to some affirmations because apparently
Mhm.
I'm a dirty hippie. Um, and Louise Hay, shout out to Louise Hay. She's dead, but go listen to her if you want. And she was talking about like if you passed there's so much abundance in this world. If
Mm,
you distributed it equally in a short matter of time, the people who had money before would have more money, and the people
right,
who didn't have any more money before would now be broke
right,
again. Because it's not about just you have something and there you go. That's going to take no. It's about we need to understand why am I at the bottom? Because there's been times in my life where I was at the
right,
bottom, and just doing away with the structure wouldn't
right,
help me learn the lesson I needed to learn that I wasn't taking care of
right.
myself, that I wasn't loving myself, that I wasn't whatever the hell you want to call it, to realize, oh, there's something
Mm,
beneficial to, you know what, let me lose a little weight, let me take care of myself a little better,
mm,
let me talk to more girls, let me do what's right for me, let me do some music, let me embrace myself. And all of a sudden I find myself climbing and not because I'm trying to, but because I'm taking care of myself and becoming
mm.
a better version of myself.
Right. And of course, there's like historical implications for just different things that happen in America that would have impacted certain demographics, in particular, of course, Black Americans, and then just anybody who's not white, and even like white people from depending on when they came, like Italians and
The
Irish,
Irish got
right?
woo.
Right. They were actually called like as black people, they were
Yeah,
considered
yeah,
for a
yeah, yeah,
while,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
So there's been different struggles that have impacted different populations of people differently that as a group leave them behind you could say. And I
Right.
think it's important to understand those and to discuss those. But I think that the emphasis should be, and the way that we should pride in America, which is a problem with a lot of the crony capitalism, is again being able to go from rags to riches, being able to say, okay, I'm going to do this, I'm going to access this knowledge and try to uplift myself.
Right.
So yeah, I agree mostly with Luis, what she said, but I do think that there would be some people who, like, if you give them money, or, then they would be able to lift themselves up.
Right.
But in general, probably she's right,
Yeah,
because if
it's
you
the
don't
same
have the
type of
skills
similar
and the
thing to
habits.
like, yeah, it's a similar thing when someone wins the lottery. It's a trope, and maybe it's a trope that we like to lean on because we don't
Mhm.
win the lottery, and like, well,
Right,
it's but it is kind of true. Like, it
right.
does ruin some lives. So let's start. You're cool to go a few more minutes.
Yeah.
Okay. Um, so let's tie this back to what we're actually dealing with, and same thing goes that we've talked about. The main thing is, because I know a lot of different people, and I try to stay as accessible, as flippant as I am with my memes and with my clips online and with my this and my that. I really try to be as accessible as possible to a
Mm,
large mix of people. Uh, and that includes people who are even pro-vaccine. I don't attack them if they comment on my
right.
thing. I'm like, rock and roll, but you know I've tried to explain recently that I don't denigrate the efficacy or the safety of the vaccine because I'm trying to convince people not to get it. I don't care if you decide to get it, everybody. I really don't. I don't think it's the best thing. I don't, and I can go into the lists of the reasons why, but it's your decision. But I am mostly pointing it out in order to poke enough holes in the narrative in order to get rid of the mandates and passports. That's all I care about. Once it goes away, I'm like, oh, okay, I'll mock you from time to time. I might post something, but that's the thing. The more the government and the media and the whatever has all tried to like, no, we know what's
Mhm.
best for you. The more I'm like, no, body sovereignty, bruh. Like I
Right,
know what's best for me. I'm
right.
I'm 35 years old. I know
Yeah.
what's best for me. I've been on this life for a hot minute, and I take good care of myself. And I've been whatever. So I don't like anybody telling me what to do, and that's why I denigrate. But I think people lose that.
Right.
So um what do you feel like is a way for us to access the people who are on the other side of the chemical divide or whatever? How do we get
I
those
think
people?
that you have to stay away from, like, the conspiracy theory territory, whether you might actually think that stuff is legit or not, and I'm not saying whether I do or don't. Some of
Mm,
that stuff I am to, say, "But I don't know, maybe."
yeah.
Um, I don't think it's effective for getting people who are on the other side to really bring that into the conversation. I think it's more effective just to ask questions and point out inconsistencies. And then, point to some of the money. Point to the fact that they were saying this in the beginning and now this now. And I think that's the best way to go about it. And I also don't think I hate when I see people breaking off relationships. So, of course, I do think that there's some point probably when some people are just so toxic in your life, whether it has to do with the mandates or not, that it is best to move on or just, like, leave some space, and maybe whatever, you can come back in a few years. But in general, like, even though my friends aren't necessarily on the front lines with me, they've gotten vaccinated or whatever their choice is, I know that, for example, some of them, like, if my car is broken down, I could call them and they're gonna come get me, right? They might not be standing out there with me, and that hurts in some ways, but I just think that there's things that are more important.
Right.
Um, so, yeah, I think that just having good conversations, modeling with your behavior, showing that love and that humanity, like you said, when you go to the store, right? Like, don't treat them like a other. And they may never come and say, you really changed my mind, or, seeing but I think that you make people think and you
Right.
inspire people. So just hold the course, keep doing what you're doing, reach out to people where you can, and really do avoid that nastiness.
Right.
And also, like, like, depopulation type conspiracy theories. Again, not saying whether I do or do not believe in them, but I just don't think it's effective to bring those really fringe ideas into the conversation when you're trying to move somebody from this side of the middle to this side of the middle.
Right, because that's really exactly right. There's no reason for us to try to convince somebody with blue hair. There's nobody, there's no reason to convince for us to try to convince boomers who hated Trump
Right,
so bad. There's literally nothing
right.
Biden could do. It's still going to be Trump's fault. Um, our job is just to wake up the people who are already like, man, what? Because most of the people I know who are vaccinated and pro-vax are against the mandates. And I
Right.
know my experience is anecdotal, but I don't think so. I
No,
really
no,
don't think
most
so.
people I do think most people are against the mandates, but it's just a matter of, like, it doesn't really impact their life, right? Like, if you do have your 2 things and you can kinda go where you are and you're keeping your job, you're like, "Yeah, I'm against mandates," but it's like, "What am I gonna do? I have to continue on in my life, and this is just business as usual," and they don't necessarily see it as the deep blow. I think there's a lot of, like, hubris too, where people can, like, look back at history and they can be like, "Oh, yeah, like, back then that was true, but now, no, like, not really."
Right,
It would just, like, shatter their reality too much.
right.
But so, yeah, I just think small steps at a time, relationships over everything, and, um, and keep a beautiful face on, right? All those beautiful faces.
Wow. Yeah, and here's the other thing too. If you like are anti-mandate and you can't, and I'm putting a big old quotation mark on can't because I can't. But people were like, "Well, I agree with you, but I can't speak up because of my job."
Mm,
You don't think I have social punishment, bro? What are you
right.
talking about? I don't have a job. But my experience is, if you want to help out and you can't do that, there are other ways.
Mm,
It's anonymous. If you wanted to call your senator and
yes.
call your congressman and just be like, hey, get rid of this, hey, and pester them, takes a couple of minutes, and it's anonymous and you don't have to post about it, but it's a way to help out. Do
And
you
you
know
do
that you
it
can
every day.
Venmo Stephanie Stephanie Edmonds or Peter Feliciano
That's
and
true.
be like, here's some money for this, here's some money for that? Like, there's ways to help out. You don't have to just
Yeah.
be, you know
Yeah, I'm part of a historic lawsuit right now with Educators for Freedom, and we're suing the city of New York, among some other, specific people there, for the vaccine mandates against teachers for our religious exemptions. So you can definitely support our lawsuit at educatorsforfreedom.com. We
beautiful.
do have a little bit of a hefty bill right now. Our lawyers are out here working hard for us. Like I said, we have a court date coming up. And then also, get yourself a Beautiful Faces sweatshirt on my
Oh,
website, teachingliberty.org slash shop. And also just check out other stuff. Like one of the big things I'm doing in 2022 is I'm building my own school. I think I said at the beginning of
yeah,
the podcast, it's just a small school, bringing back the one room schoolhouse, co-op homeschooling style, hopefully between, 7 to 10 families, which would make it economically feasible to have a space and all that and still keep it reasonable for people, get them they want to pull out of the system, but still have like a high quality certified teacher. And yeah, so go to teachingliberty.org/schoolhouse for more information on that. Leave your information. I'm collecting. And of course, I'm going to try to set up my own, like around where I live, but I'm also getting people submitting all over the tri state. I think I have a couple in Florida and California as well. So I will be connecting people together.
right. And that's ultimately going back to that same thing. It's about self-honesty, right? I
Mm.
had Do Not Comply NYC on my show a couple months ago, which YouTube deleted.
No,
Um, you
Rachel.
YouTube deleted it, even though we just said things that are now, a few months later, what the CDC is saying.
Oh my goodness.
Is YouTube going to instate it? No, because white liberals know what's best for us. But she said that the reason why a lot of teachers aren't leaving is because they care about the students. It's not that they want to comply; it's that they want to be there. They don't want to leave their kids in a lurch. You know what I mean?
That's
Like they
true,
want to,
that's
like,
true.
be there.
No, I agree. It's one of those kind of like opportunity costs that you have to measure. For a long time, I, had said, there's a lot of things I don't like about the system, but I believe in the value that I bring to at least the kids that I touch. I liked the school that I was at. I felt like we were doing good things and we were making a difference, and it was
Right.
giving me the experience I needed to go on and do bigger and better things and maybe open my own school or be a principal of my own school within the system because I
Mhm.
do want to reach. Those are the kids who I want to work with, right? I don't necessarily want to work with kids who can afford to pay school. But
Right.
it's gotten to the point where I see that the system is so self-destructive that it's the opportunity cost. I can stay and try to bail out water from a ship that is sinking, and like, like it's just coming on so fast. It's like
Right.
the Titanic and I have a bucket. Um,
Right.
and so it's like, okay, I can either stay here, and I'm sorry, I know that people are gonna, be hurt from me leaving in the short time, because maybe I could help keep it up a little bit longer. But there's a lifeboat over there. I'm gonna swim to that lifeboat and make sure that no more people are stuck in any more sinking ships. And so we're starting out small, and hopefully we can build and spread the model to other people. Maybe open up multiple one room schoolhouses for, do like one K to 3 and like one 4 to 6, and then like a high school one. But yeah, just trying to start small and build, because I really do believe it's at the local level. We've gotten too
Mm.
disconnected. Our politics have gotten too nationalized. The education department and the federal and state levels have gotten too bureaucratic. And just like the masks are like the physical representation of that. The parents not being allowed in the building because of COVID are just peeling back all the nonsense that's been going on for a lot of time. So I'm really hoping that, I can come out and make a difference in some families' lives, and then grow and compete. We have to compete, right? Why are we again trying to save this sinking ship? Let's build our own. Let's be the thing that replaces it when it is rendered irrelevant.
Boom. Yeah, I almost said the F word. I would never do anything fucking like that. And that's no, that's beautiful. And you can find that at teachingliberty.org. Um,
Yes.
and let's wrap up with this. Because it puts a nice bow on it. I think the biggest problem we have, and this is the same thing across the board in education, in wherever, in mandates and blah blah blah. The government doesn't know what's best for us. The
Mm.
government doesn't. I said it on a past show, but the Department of Motor Vehicles, the DMV, the feds, the large group of bureaucratic whatever. These people have had 105 years. The DMV was started in 1917. They've had 105 years to get the DMV right, and all of us still hate it. Why are we now going to trust them with our kids' chemical with
Right,
our
right,
kids? Why are we not? You know what I'm saying?
right,
Parents, you have a decision. It's up to you what goes into your kids' bodies. I'm sorry, it's up to you. It's not up to the government. It's never has been. You know what I'm saying?
for sure.
So how can you add to the parents, to the people who are fighting, confidence in themselves and their sovereignty?
I would say that it's about, again, like reassessing things and realizing that we have the power, right? Um, we built our lives essentially around these public schools. So why not actually have control over your kids and build your life around that in a way that you more are in line with your values? And I know it's hard, it's a big leap. It requires, even for myself right now, it's like, my son is going to the public school, and I would love to have him at home and be teaching him and homeschooling him. I'm a single parent, so hopefully by building the school I will be able to do that.
Right.
And we all have lives, but I think that this is so important. Our kids are the future, and this can make a real big difference. So just got to take the leap sometimes.
Right on. Well, all right. Last time, go ahead and plug your stuff, please.
Yeah, so you can catch me on Instagram. That's like really like the platform where you can really see like my more personal side, some of my life. And then I also do like talk about my school and talk about my YouTube and stuff. So, but it's a nice mix of stuff over there, teaching liberty. I also do post on Twitter. Sometimes I get a little more spicy than others. Excuse me, at Teach Liberty One. And then, of course, my website, teachingliberty.org. It's like kind of a Patreon deal. So you can become a member, support me, get access to a community that doesn't have big tech censorship, though I do moderate. So don't get crazy. But no, we've been good in there. Members only content and so much more. So definitely go over there, check it out. And I look forward to seeing more of your beautiful face.
Awesome. My name is Peter, everybody. Make sure you go subscribe wherever you're listening. Make sure you like this, rate it, review it. I know it's dumb for me to say it every week, but I don't care. I have to do what I have to do. Leave me alone. But pay me money. Patreon.com/conservatish is where you can support my podcast and my music. I'm going to be coming out with a new song this week. It's a short one, but it's a punchy one. So everybody, if you don't like bad words, cover your ears. Okay. And I also am going to be, you can find me on Instagram at Peter_Feliciano or at CONSERVATISH as my backup, on Twitter at Rule62Peter, or just go to my link tree. In my Instagram has all my links, my music, my Spotify, my iTunes, my this, my that, whatever. And I love you very much, everybody. Thank you so much again, Stephanie, for joining me on the show, Teaching Liberty. I'll go ahead and end the broadcast now.